Alpine Hiking and Basic Mountaineering, a series of lessons on the fundamentals of mountain travel. Our instructor for the course is Dick McGowan, young veteran of many major expeditions to the world's most challenging peaks.
The film leads us into several of our topics for this evening. A young couple heading up for an afternoon on the Alpine slopes. And I think they'll go out and take a look at one of the glaciers. It looks like an intriguing thing to do. Take a look at the big crevasses out on the glacier. After all, they've heard that their friends often go up and go out on the glacier, climb this way once in a while, and it looks plenty safe. You can see where all the big holes are. But lo and behold, it can be dangerous. Now what to do? Here we are, hours above any help, and you have a problem on your hands. This leads us into several topics, certainly. One is something about glacier travel, and another of the topics, perhaps the most important of our sessions, and that is on the various mountain hazards. Certainly all of us will, even experienced mountaineers, will go along with the idea that there are many hazards in the hills. And one of them you saw demonstrated here. That is being out on a glacier without being properly roped up. Not only roped up, but knowing how to use the climbing rope. Whenever you're out on the glacier, roped up, the climbing rope should be kept stretched out between all the climbers. You'll recall in our snow climbing session that we practiced the continuous rope climbing, having the rope out full so that as the climbers moved along the glacier, event any of them fell or one of them fell, the others could go into a self-arrest and stop the climber. And you recall also we discussed using crampons out on the glacier and being properly equipped. And all these things are certainly important. Another thing when you're out on the glacier is that you have attached to you some other little lines in the event you fall into a crevasse like our friend here on the glacier, that you can get yourself back out again. And these are called prusik knots. Let's put on the climbing rope. Rope in like we have so many times already with the bowline on a coil. Being end men on the rope. Remember also that we said we were using a standard 120 feet climbing rope, a nylon rope, or some other synthetic fiber, 3/8 inch in diameter. And we finish our knots off with a little high hitch that they're tied tightly around the waist and below the belt, so the initial fall of any shock is on the hips. And now, before ever going out on the glacier, you want to know how to use these little prusik slings. And these are 1/4 inch rope, either nylon or manila. They're usually made by forming a little loop in one end of it, just enough to get your foot in, and doing the same on the other end, using little bowline knots to make these loops. And in measuring these, they should be just about nose or head high in length when you have the loops formed. Now these little knots, and with a loop on either end, are fastened directly on to the climbing rope itself. So we take the climbing rope and we put on these prusiks by tying what's called a little prusik knot. Several little loops in here. The thing is that this will slide up and down the rope so that if you are hanging in a crevasse, you can, by sliding these up the rope, get yourself out again. And there are 3 of these, one for each foot, and then one for around your chest to hold you into the climbing rope. And getting yourself out is called then prusiking. And we see Dan here out on our snow climbing practice session putting on the prusik knots. 2, one for each foot, and then one finally around the waist. Little loops in the rope. The top one, generally for the chest, there's a number of ways to do this, but a straight prusik is as good as any way. And then notice that as he finishes these, he pushes them right in tight to his climbing rope, And notice how they will easily slip up or down, case may demand, so that he can, by sliding these up and down the rope, he hopes to get himself out of a crevasse if he should be so unfortunate as to fall in one. Another thing you'll notice, he has on a parka. It's always a good idea to have a parka on when you're out on the glacier, and a pair of mittens, because it can get awful cold down in one of these crevasses, of course. And then he stuffs these in his pocket. He doesn't tie them around him, and they're not in his pack, where if he was hanging down the bottom of a crevasse, he'd have to jerk them out. But rather, right in his pocket, so he can immediately put them out, either in his side pockets or in his main pocket of his jacket. And then as you're climbing along the glacier, you're moving along, chomp, chomp, along, and these are all the time attached to you. They're pretty much out of the way. You stuff in the big climbing pockets or in your jacket. And now, in the event of a fall, what do? Let's say that you're dangling here in the bottom of the crevasse, and you're dangling away, and you won't fall too far, you hope, because you have the rope out tight anyway, and that in that situation, you wouldn't fall too far. But there you are, dangling away. The rest of the team has stopped you. You're down, say, 10 feet or so. It shouldn't be any more than that. You kind of wonder about the technique being used up above if you fall too much farther than 10 feet. So here you kind of dangle, crampons on, next to the icy wall with a parka and mittens on. Now you whip out these little prussics while you're hanging here, hoping you can kind of dangle with your crampons into the slope. And you drop one, and immediately, as soon as possible, wrap it around your foot, one of these, and so that you can relieve the weight off of your climbing rope around your waist and get the weight on the prusik itself so you can stand in it. And then as you're sitting here kind of struggling away and dangling, immediately try to get the other foot in the other one, and they should come out fairly easy. So here you sit. Now, in a nylon rope, you'll prusik for a while before getting anywhere, because there's a certain amount of stretch in this rope. And you slide these little prussiks up, wondering at first probably if they're going to hold or not, but manila on nylon is fairly successful in holding one's weight. And you can always come around once more with the prussik. But note how the prussik works now as I start actually to get up and relieve my weight from the floor and actually get it out onto the rope itself. See the little knot as you shove it up, it slides up the rope, but it doesn't come back down as you put your weight on it. And you move these up 4 or 5 or 6 inches at a time. And one of the problems, of course, in prussiking is that you start dangling down this crevasse and twisting around. But if you're near the wall, you can usually, with your feet, keep yourself oriented outwards. And you keep shoving these on up the rope, slowly on up. Meanwhile, up above, they probably have you with a self-arrest and waiting for your emergence near the top. But up you go, right on up the rope, sliding along. Now, one of the hazards or problems of this, of course, is getting up to the top and not being able to get over. What do you do in a situation like that? Well, you hope that the team above can get into a position to kind of help you out over the lip of the crevasse. And also that they have put an ice axe along the edge of the lip of the crevasse, tied it up there so it won't come down on you, but the rope won't cut back into the ice along the edge of the crevasse. And you can prussik out in not too long. And so that's the prussik method of crevasse rescue then. Now, prussiking isn't the only way of getting out of the crevasse, and as you can see, if you have to prussik very far, it can be a rather slow and tedious process. Well, let's take off the prussik and see what would happen. Say we're in a larger party of, maybe a party of 6 or 8 climbers or more. Then we could use some other method where we'd have a little manpower up above. And this would be the other method, that is the bilgari. I need to take off a couple of the prussiks here. from the rope, so it just leaves me with one. And actually, with a large party, you could get by with just one prusik on the climbing rope. And it would be in tight, and you'd have it on the same way as we discussed before. So then this is the prusik method that we've just looked at, where the man gets himself out of a crevasse, self-evacuation. And with small parties, this is probably an essential thing to know. You can practice this in the town outside of a building late at night so the neighbors aren't wondering what you're doing. Practice going up someplace like this. An easier method of evacuation is probably the Bilgeri method. And there, the boys up above do most of the work, and you just kind of direct them. Well, let's see how this Bilgeri works. Let's assume the same situation now, that I fell into a crevasse, or someone pushed me, and I'm dangling down in here. So what do? Well, I whip out my single prusik, I have at least, and I get one foot out on it, relieve the weight of this, so I can dangle there at least on one, and relieve that weight around my waist, because this get awful sore hanging there very long at all, and very dangerous, of course, in the crevasse like this. Well, then here I am dangling with one, and then the boys up above, since it's a little larger party, will throw me down another rope. Thank you, fellows. And then I will take that one, pass it under my climbing rope, and notice that these are under my climbing rope also, so that they tend to keep me in. And I thread this one down and put it around my foot, so that, as you can probably see, what I have now is kind of a little ladder affair. And now I'm the boss. Oh, I say, upright. Tension there, upright. Okay, up left. That's it. Come on, fellas, hold upright. Attaboy, up left. Up left, that's it. Up left. Good. Upright. That's it. Come on, upright up there. That's it. Up left. Oh, now they're working. Upright. There we go. Up left. That's it. And there we go, right on up out of the crevasse. Easy as just climbing a flight of stairs. They do all the work up above. And they probably get sore at me about then and let me down, I suppose. There we go. So that's the Bilgeri method of crevasse rescue. And you can see that an experienced party can get a man out of a crevasse in a very short time, knowing how to use this particular technique. And so that crevasse rescue shouldn't be too much of a problem after all. Tie my various knots here. And notice the ice axe in the chart here, that they have put the ice axe right up at the edge of the crevasse, because if they didn't, the ropes would cut well back into the ice there, so that you couldn't pull up on them. There's a tremendous amount of friction as the rope passes over the ice along the edge here. So it's very important to get that ice axe out just as far as you possibly can. Every inch out to the edge that you can get, you're that much better off. And then the fellows up above, by putting the rope around them in kind of a sitting hip belay or around an ice axe, can just raise this man up like we saw doing. Just upright, up left, upright, and you just kind of just pop right up out of the crevasse just as fast as you can go. And so these particular techniques of crevasse rescue are extremely important to know before you get out on a glacier like this. And our friends, of course, were out wandering around. They didn't have a rope on. They didn't have the 10 essentials with them. They had no knowledge of how to travel out here on a glacier. They probably couldn't have been any worse off than that. It was a beautiful day, we'll have to say that for it.